There's a question which is asked. I mean, the Medrash asked the question. Yosef was the most beautiful man who ever walked the face of the earth. There was no person ever had such beauty. And yet it says when they sold him, they sold for 20 sloim, 20 silver coins. I mean, is that a man of that stature, beauty? That's all he fetches, 20 silver coins. So the Medrash answers. The Torah tells us when they put him in the pit, it says, Habo Reik Ein Bo Moyim, in last week's reading. The pit was empty, it had no water. So the Gemara Shabbos says a question. If it was empty, evidently it didn't have water. It's totally redundant. So the Gemara answer is that my main bod, it may have had water, but there were scorpions and snakes were in the pit. Okay? So there's a question which is asked, which Mayor Simcha Vinsk mentioned in his work. I mean, they suspected that he was what? That he was a rodef. He was out to kill them, and his intention was evil. I mean, if it was a snake pit with scorpions, and he survived the pit, evidently he's a tzaddik. Otherwise, why is Hashem saving him? So that should have been a confirmation that their whole evaluation of Yosef was totally wrong. So Rameir Silvin, I don't know if he says himself or he cites others that say that the snakes were not in the bottom of the pit, but they were in the wall of the pit. So when you're in the pit and you look at the wall, you see snakes and you see scorpions. But if you look from the top down, you don't see the snakes and scorpions. So Yosef saw the snakes and scorpions. They did not see it. As a result of that, they didn't realize that he was a tzaddik because they believed it was an empty pit, had no water, there's nothing else in the pit. The Torah reveals to us there was no water, but there was snakes and scorpions. When Yosef saw those snakes and scorpions, he was so terrified that he lost the color in his face. He looked like a corpse. So when they pulled him out of the pit to sell him, it looked like a corpse. Now, a person as a human being could be the most beautiful person, but if he looks like a corpse, what's he worth? So they'll tell him, well, it looks like he's sickly. What? That's the reason why he only was able to fetch 20 sloim. But ultimately, they understood that Yosef, when he gets back to what he really is and what he looks like, he's going to fetch the highest price ever for a slave. Now, what is that location? You don't go to Sudan for that. You go to the height of civilization, you go to Egypt. So therefore, they understood if Yosef is going to be sold by these slave traders, the ultimate destination is Egypt. So when they came to Egypt for the food, so until then, they couldn't go to Egypt because the father would say, where are you going? They can't just disappear. But now that they're being sent to Egypt, to Mitzrayim to purchase food, now they have the main mission, or the double mission is not only they're going to purchase food, simultaneously they're going to sniff out Egypt to see if Yosef is there. Because ultimately, that must have been the destination to where he was sold. I mentioned many times when we learned the previous parsha, which Alan alluded to, that if the brothers didn't see the snakes and scorpions in the pit, what was the point of terrifying Yosef? That he should see in the wall of the pit the snakes and scorpions, and he should actually be, so rattled by this that literally he lost the color, he lost the blood, stopped flowing in his veins. It was frozen. What's the point? So what I had said was similar. The Torah tells us that when he was sold to the slave traders, the caravan was coming, which carried lotus and perfume and very positive cargo. So Rashi over there says, well, why is the Torah revealed? Rashi is quoting the Gemara, that although that normally the Arabs, when they transport their cargo, it's usually naphtha and foul-smelling resins, which can get a person sick. The Torah tells us this cargo was just to the contrary. Everything was perfume, very positive type of herbs. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is the schar that Hashem gives to the tzaddikim. That's the reward he gives to the tzaddikim. So we ask the question. Yosef believes he doesn't even know where he's going. Here he believed he'd be a king, he'd be a ruler, he'd be what? And now he's being sold to who knows where. as a slave. So what kind of schar l'tzadikim? Hashem gives schar l'tzadikim that here the cargo was pleasant smelling, not this noxious type of material. So what I said was in the past that Yosef right now has a very serious question in his mind. Maybe his brothers were right. All that he had believed was prophetic. Maybe they were all delusionary. It was all delusionary. He believed. When he was thrown into that pit, Hashem wanted him to understand it's not delusionary. What you saw was correct. And I'm with you. You may not understand now why you're being sold into slavery, but I'm with you. Although your brothers don't see who you are, but you should know who you are. And that's why he wasn't bitten. That was the message. That was the takeaway from coming out of that pit. Now he's finally put on this caravan. And again, he's going into the oblivion. Hashem says, I'm with you. Although the cargo normally is noxious, here the cargo was something out of the ordinary. Lo dias chorishel tzadikim. Hashem informs us that the rewarding tzadikim, he never allows them to feel that they're abandoned. And Hashem is always in the background, indicating to them that he's with them. How it's going to turn out, that you're not privy to now. But ultimately, it's going to be good. That's the schar, that's the reward he's giving the tzaddikim. That's what we said in the past. So that's the pit, and that's the cargo that's being transported on this particular caravan. It was known, it's a Gemara, and it's the Medrash, that Yosef was fluent in 70 languages. He knew 70 languages. Now, how is he so proficient and he spoke, you'd say like, the King's English. In every language, he spoke it as if that was his first tongue. So the Gemara tells us in Sota, the night before he was released from prison to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh, Gabriel had come and had taught him 70 languages. So not only did he know Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew, which is his natural tongue, in addition, he had another 70 languages. So Yosef knew 71 languages. That's the Gemara. Gemara in Sota. We find over here that the Sarah Mashkim said, Nar, he's unstable. When he depicted Paro, simultaneously, as he says, when I was in prison, there was a dream interpreter. And who was he? Nar, Rashi says, Shoter. He's unstable. Ivri. Ivri means he comes from the other side of the river. He doesn't speak our language. What does that mean? When was he taught the 70 languages? The night before he was released from prison. So the Sarah Mashkim, the wine steward, was unaware that he had this ability. They knew 70 languages. He was only taught the 70 languages the night before he was free from his prison. So there was no way for him to know it. However, the Bala Turim in last week's Parsha writes that when he was in the house of Potiphar and he oversaw all his affairs, his business affairs, Gabriel had come there and had taught him the 70 language. Why? So his master should be impressed with him that he's a man of the world. There's no person he can't negotiate with and interact with. So he already knew the 70 languages when he was in the home of Potiphar. So according to that, what do you have to say? That Yosef did not divulge his ability. When he was in prison, he spoke to them like in a halting Egyptian. Because you understand, if the moment the Sarah Mashkim is depicting Yosef as what? As unstable, he doesn't even speak our language. But if Yosef already had revealed in prison that he's proficient in all languages, so what's he saying? I mean, the Sarah Mashkim is going to be caught in a lie. What if he doesn't speak our language? The moment he speaks to Paro in his own language. He doesn't need an interpreter to speak Egyptian. So if you say he was taught the night before he left prison, so therefore the Sarah Mashkim didn't know. Because when he was in prison with him, he didn't speak Egyptian as it was his natural tongue. But if you say he already was taught Egyptian in the home of Potiphar, so Potiphar should see how special he was. So how could he say that he doesn't speak our language? The answer is you have to say that Yosef had concealed this. He kept a very low profile. He did not allow these people to know who he was or what he was. He was a dream interpreter. Therefore, the Saramashkim is depicting him as what? As a person who doesn't even speak our language. That's Ivri. Okay, I mean, that's what you have to say. According to the Gemara, it's not a problem, because at that moment when they were together, he did not know the languages. According to Balaturim, that it was even earlier, Yosef had kept this a secret, had hidden this, he didn't know. And then afterwards he says, Eved, he's a slave, and it's written in the protocols of Egypt that a slave cannot rise to power, is not permitted to wear the garments of the minister. He wanted to literally head him off at the pass. There's no way that he could assume this position of authority, of power. So Rashi had cited the Chazal that at the beginning of Beis, Arurim Rishoim, Shem Tovosum Shlema. Cursed are the evil, that even when they do something good, they can't do it the right way. I mean, you're already revealing that there's such a person. What do you have to denigrate him? You're painting such a ugly picture of him. Especially your beneficiary, what he did on your behalf. So frame him in a positive frame. Why such a negative frame? The answer is Arurim Mishoyim, cursed are the evil, that even when they do good, they can't do it correctly. I asked the question yesterday. The Saramashkim understood that if Yosef is seen in his true light, he's rising to power. There's no way Paro will not appoint him to be in a very powerful position, as we see that he did. That Paro says the only thing I'm above you is the throne. Outside the throne, nothing happens in this country without your authorization. And so the Saramashkim had Yosef understood to the nth degree. He was, and now he has what to be concerned. If Yosef is going to rise to that position of power, Yosef asked him a favor: mention me, remember me. He let him rot in the dungeon for another 2 years. You don't think Yosef's going to take revenge? So he's shaking in his boots or in his sandals that the moment Yosef gets out, his life is over. So he has to do everything he can for self-preservation to prevent this from happening. If that's the case, why is Aruru Shoyim Shei Tovos Shleima? That was the question I asked yesterday. Now, the Saramashkim's concern in Yosef's mind, was there even a consideration he would take revenge? In the reality, definitely not. When Yosef stayed for another 2 years in the dungeon, he understood. Why did he understood when he interpreted the dream, as I said in the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, that he was meant to get out, to rise to power. But he had understood that who's going to facilitate it? The Saramashkim, and he has to take initiative. And the Saramashkim should be the one to take the initiative to do it. But he misread the dream, Yosef. The Saramashkim being a bad guy, there's not even a consideration. You never put your faith in Rehovim. These people are heathens. There was never a consideration that this man even had the capacity to be appreciative. What it meant to be, Hashem was telling Yosef, ultimately, he will bring your glory, not by choice, as it says. We see clearly. It was by choice. He said he had no choice. So because Yosef immediately understood, if he wasn't released immediately, and according to the dream he should have been, evidently he failed. Yosef failed. So he's attributing his spending another 2 years in the dungeon, not because the Saramashkim, the wine steward, did not do what he was asked to do, but rather God was punishing him. Because he failed, that was a lack of faith. So if he attributes to himself, the Saramashkim is not the person to take revenge, even when you rise to power. That's the way Yosef processed it. If the Saramashkim would have understood who Yosef was, He was involved with him for a year. They spent the year together. We had said that Potiphar, although he's a bad guy, he's a bad guy, Potiphar. He was the minister of executions. He was Sarah Tabochim, according to one interpretation. This prison, for political prisoners, that was his prison, because he was the executioner. But he recognized Yosef who he was, because Hashem hitzlich darko. God is with him. Because whatever he spoke, he always mentioned the name of God. So immediately he attributed his success because Yosef is a godly person. Do you think in the prison, Yosef spoke differently? Yosef was a godly person. So if he's a godly person, how could you even consider for a moment that this man is going to try to end your life? How? You know what the answer is? Because a Russia, he always has that distorted lens. If the person is truly a Russia, you always see it wrongly. But it's so obvious. He doesn't even, he's not that kind of person. As Potiphar recognized that Yosef was that, why didn't he kill him immediately? Because Potiphar, as I mentioned yesterday, immediately understood there's no way this man was going to rape his wife. And they did the test. She tried to frame him. And that's why he was put into prison, only because he wanted to save his marriage. Otherwise, he should have killed him immediately. Kill him. The answer is because Potiphar understood there's no way Yosef could have even done that. Being a godly man. So if the Sarah Mashkin would recognize that, what are you going and clipping his wings and denigrating him? The answer is because Rishoyim, a person in Russia, even when he does good, he can't do it right. He always has to denigrate the person, because he's coming from his vantage point, the way he processes everything. And as a result of that, he painted the most ugly picture about Yosef. And mentioned, we had the Gemara Bava Metzia, we studied together. It says that Shufra, the Yaakov made Shufra, the Adam Rishon. The radiance of Yaakov was a semblance of the radiance of Adam. Okay? Yaakov spent 20 years with his father-in-law. When he originally says, I don't expect you to work for me for nothing. Tell me what your wages. He says, I want the hand of your daughter, Rachel. So what's his response? I make this point. He says, well, I got to marry her off. I might as well get married to you. You understand? I have to marry off anyway. I might as well give him to you rather than to a stranger. Is that a response? You have a man that radiates like Adam Rishon. He's one of a kind in the world. Is that what, besides being your nephew? Well, I got to marry off. I might as well give it to you. Because you're going to give me 7 hard years of labor. The answer is Lavan had no appreciation. Not for a moment for who Yaakov was. He didn't even recognize who Yaakov was. Therefore, that, and proof in the pudding is that's why he said what he said. If I have to marry off, you might as well be the guy, rather than marrying with someone else. That is the Sarah Mashkin. That he spoke this way is an indication that he's a Russia. That everything he processes is through his own lens, and he never appreciated or even noticed how special Yosef was. Therefore, he's concerned for his own skin. The man's going to take revenge. My life is worthless. I have to do whatever I can to stop him. That's Arur B'Shoyim. I'll give you an example. The Wall Street environment. Everybody is a ladder climber. You always do something to get to the next level. Unless a person of special integrity, you'll badmouth someone else to be able to climb on his corpse to get to the next level, if you have to. That's the way people are. But a person who really has faith in God, say, look, what's mine is mine, what's his is his. There's no reason to try to undercut the other guy to advance. If it's meant to be and I have the qualification, I'll have it. But most people don't look at it that way. I don't want to say most people. Many people don't. And they're always sniping at the next person, because you want to go, either you want his position or surpass his position. So you always point out failings to the other person, so you should be able to advance yourself. Shvadron, Zechat Tzaddik Levrocha, was the brother-in-law of Rosh Zalman Auerbach, their brothers-in-law. And Rosh Shvadron, although he was a Maggid, and I always said, he could have outdone Zero Mastel 20 times over. in the Yiddish theater, but that wasn't his place. He was literally a Godel Torah. He knew the whole Torah's entirety. Rishon Shadron. He had a kollel in Yerushalayim, and he headed the kollel. He had special kollel people under his tutelage. And I knew someone who was very close with him, he was an American, lived in Israel at the time. This is in the 70s. And he helped him support the kollel, and he was very close with him. And there was a certain person who would come to Rishon Shadron, an Israeli, and cry on his shoulder that he needs money and money and money. And from the little bit of money he had, he lent this man money, would lend him. And the man never paid him. And he'd come back for more. And although he never paid the old debt, again, he's come back for more. And he would always lend him because he was a tzaddik. And it bothered this American person, who was also an observant person. I mean, how do you let yourself be victimized? The man doesn't pay the debt. Lend him again. Says, it's okay. I'm willing to let it go. Even if he doesn't pay me, it's okay. Finally, what happens? This person was in the export business. And in those days, if you exported, the government would give you a certain percentage of the sale to encourage export. So you'd get a certain percentage of the amount of money. What happened? The man was dishonest. When he actually wrote the bill relating for export, he never exported, and he would submit a paper to the government what they owed him. The government did an investigation. They realized he was stealing from them. He never exported the goods, and he was collecting money from the government. So what do? They arrested him. Rav Shomshor gets a message from the jail. This man needs bail money. Could he bail him out? Yeah, that he borrowed from for years, never paid the debt. He let it go. The guy has the chutzpah. The man behaves dishonestly. The man's a thief. He wants Rav Shomshor to put up the bail money to get him out of jail. Wasn't prison, jail. So when this American heard, who was very close to Rav Shomshor Hizli, I was livid. He says, I can't believe that you're even considering it. He says, I'm going to discuss it with my brother, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. And whatever he says between two of us, that's what I'm going to do. What do you think Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said? Give him the money. Give him the money for the bail money. Let him get out of jail. This person went crazy. In his capacity of understanding what Das Torah is, he accepted it, but he was pained. This man is a bad man. How do you go and he takes the last penny out of your pocket and doesn't repay, and now he wants bail money? That's the right thing to do, because if you see it right, what Hashem gives you, he gives you because he's supposed to do what you're supposed to do. But you have to be at that special level to see it that way. That was Rav Shlomo Shadran and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Here we're talking about this is very simple. If you're exposed to a man like Yosef for a year, who's one of a kind of a man, where the Potiphar recognizes who he was, and he attributed all his success, is because God's with him. So why are you tearing him? Why are you mutilating him, denigrating him? Say it the way it is. The answer is because you're a bad guy. That's the answer. Paro v'yikras Yosef. Paro sent for Yosef, and he called him. He summoned him. He was rushed out of the pit. He was in the dungeon. He was groomed. He was shaved in the pit. And he was given a change of garments, clothing. Yovel Paro. What does the Torah have to tell us that he was rushed out of the pit? It's say Paro v'yikras Yosef. What does that speak? With immediacy, quickly. It's obvious. If the king gives an order and the king is not at rest until he has his dream interpreted, of course they rush him out. What does there have to reveal to us that Vayiritzu? The Torah doesn't write anything unless it's something for us that is a takeaway. What do we learn from this? So here there's a very beautiful seforno. There's an expression, Yeshua Hashem terrifying. God's salvation comes about as quickly as a blink of an eye. That's how quickly it happens.
Rabbi, it's Rosh Hashanah, right?
Right. Vayiritzu bin abor. Yosef knows he's being punished. Well, that's why he's there. When is it going to happen? It can happen in a moment. Literally, you could be in the depths of darkness. And in a second, you can have such a rise in power. What happened to Yosef? He was a slave rotting in a dungeon. And all of a sudden, he becomes the most powerful person in the world. The only thing he doesn't have is the throne. Other than that, Yeshua Hashem terrifying. Torah is telling me he was rushed with immediacy. When the time came for him to rise to that power, it was with immediacy. Otherwise, there's no reason for Torah tells Vayiritzu min abor. It's understood. If the king is a dictate, with immediacy, you bring him. Take a look at the Sifarno if you have the Mikros Gedolos. Kederach kol tshuas Hashem. As whenever comes to God's salvation, shenasis kmo rega. When God's ready to bring the salvation, it comes in a moment. You're not even prepared for it. It just happens. Kamru kikrov Yeshua silovo. Yeshua is about to happen. Kamrlo ami shomeali kemat oivem achnia. In a moment, God will subordinate our enemies. He says, when we left Egypt, you hear this? The Jews, we didn't believe we were leaving. Paro says yes, Paro says no, back and forth. And then ultimately, not only does he let us leave, they drive us out of Egypt. They force us to leave. They rush us out with such a hurried manner that our dough wasn't even leavened. That's how quickly it happened. And Amru Lasus Los, yeah, this is it. All more Lasus Los, this is what's going to happen at the end of time. Suddenly, the Odom will come to a sanctuary. Yeah, that hasn't happened. So what we ask, when is it going to happen? The Navi says in Malachi, the master will come suddenly to his sanctuary, as what happened with Yosef, and brings all the psukim. The Yeshua Hashem is what? Is sudden.